My name is Terry Welsh, and I'm president of the Banning Ranch Conservancy, and I'm really happy to share a really successful story, 25 years in the making. Sorry. Previous, here we go. So for those who are not familiar, this is Randall Preserve, formerly Banning Ranch. It's 400 acres. You can see it doesn't touch the ocean, but it comes right up to Coast Highway, and it's nestled between Newport Beach, Costa Mesa, Huntington Beach. It's at the mouth of the Santa Ana River. It's been privately owned property for many years. Here's another view. No, some of the just wildlife features are it's one of only 2 federally recognized coastal vernal pool complexes in Orange County. It's the only one with federally declared critical habitat for the San Diego fairy shrimp. And the entire property is federally declared critical habitat for the California gnatcatcher. There have been a population of cactus wrens on the property. They've plummeted down to 0. They may be making a comeback. It's also an area where you will find burrowing owls spending the winter, one of the few places left in coastal Orange County. And there's evidence that people have been living there for 3,000 years. And I do want to take this moment to acknowledge that not just Randall Preserve, but most of Southern California are the ancestral homelands of the Tongva and Hashman people. And we need to honor not just the ancestors that walked these lands back in the day, but their descendants who continue to walk them today. And I think we all need to thank our Hashman and Tongva brothers and sisters and tribal activists. They are a very important part of this successful coalition. I'm sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so I'm going to be coughing a little bit here, but you can just, whoa, sorry. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead one slide too many. Well, that's okay. You can imagine that the site has been coveted by real estate developers for a long time. And in 1996, there was a 1,750 home proposal for the property. And I got involved in 1999, and we formed a Sierra Club task force, the Banning Ranch Park and Preserve Task Force. And the slides do not, oh, here we go. Okay, 1999, so it's 25 years ago. Now, for some reason, the Taylor Woodrow walked away from the project. I would like to think that it was because of us, but we were so inexperienced and green back then that I think it was just they did the numbers and realized it was just not a good investment. So Taylor Woodrow walked away in 2001. But in 2007, there was a change in ownership. Not all of the ownership, but some of the ownership. And they came back with a brand new proposal for 1,375 homes. That was the NBR proposal in 2007. We formed a nonprofit 501c3 in 2008, the Banning Ranch Conservancy. The city of Newport Beach practically fell over themselves to approve this draft environmental impact report in 2012. But then we challenged it in court, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Meanwhile, the owners brought the project to the Coastal Commission. It is in the coastal zone. And in 2016, which is really one of the absolute most pivotal days, everybody showed up, and the Coastal Commission denied the permit for this project. Now, at this point, I think the owners could have gone back and shaved off a lot of features of the project. The project was just too big. They could have brought back a smaller project. The Coastal Commission staff even acknowledged that there was room out there to build a smaller project. But within a few months, we heard a decision from the California State Supreme Court, that a unanimous decision that threw out the environmental impact report that the city of Newport Beach had approved in 2012. So really, if this Coastal Commission denial of the permit was a step back, the state Supreme Court decision really sent them back to square zero. And at that point, we didn't know what was going to happen. You know, were they going to just, was the developer going to come back and try to get another project built? If so, they would have to do a brand new EIR. But fortunately, at this point, Trust for Public Land decided to get involved and really start negotiating with the owners. At this point, obviously, the owners were a little bit more amenable about selling the property for conservation purposes than they had been before. They had been gung-ho about building this project. And then I think, yeah, I will say right now, it is the most important development in the entire story here, was Frank and Joanne stepped up and donated $50 million. Frank and Joanne Randall a successful Newport Beach couple who really care about, they know they can't take their money with them, and they've done amazing things for the environment, not just $50 million to help with them as Banning Ranch. They also, around the same year, I think, they spent another $50 million to preserve a huge swath, much larger swath of property up in the Tehachapi Mountains. But with Trust for Public Land involved and $50 million on the table, things kind of fell into place after that. And for example, we had our state assemblywoman, Cotty Petrie Norris, was able to secure $8 million. And that's a tremendous amount of money. It gets overshadowed by the $50 million from Frank and Joanne. But I mean, for a single assembly person to bring $8 million for an acquisition is incredible. And we'll forever be thankful for Cotty for doing that. And then on December 20th, 2022, escrow closed. The entire property was purchased from the owners by Trust for Public Land and immediately handed over to a state agency. And that state agency is the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority, MRCA. They hold the title of the property, and it will be protected as permanent public open space. Here it is now. It's known appropriately as Randall Preserve, in honor of Frank and Joanne Randall. Frank unfortunately passed away last year. Joanne is still alive. But, I mean, we really need to thank Frank and Joanne. They made this possible with their $50 million. The name will also eventually include a tribal name. The tribes are, my understanding, are trying to come together on a tribal name that will be added to it. So it'll be the Frank and Joanne Randall Preserve at tribal name, possibly Genga, but that's to be decided. What's ahead? Well, the site is an oil field for a long time, so it's going to be cleaned up, and that's going to take 2 to 3 years. And then they'll be planning for the park. There'll be a resource management plan, a coastal resilience strategy, because there are coastal wetlands on the property. There'll be a public access plan, and there'll be a tribal access and engagement plan. Now, the Banning Ranch Conservancy is, we have a memorandum of understanding with MRCA to work on the first 3, the resource management plan, the coastal resilience strategy, and the public access plan. And as far as the tribal access and engagement plan, that tribal activist group, Sacred Places Institute, is working with MRCA to develop that. And these will be, these are all in the stages of development right now, very early stages of development. So we are entering a new, totally, we spent the last 25 years being a scrappy environmental group, trying to fight a development, really. And now it's a completely new day. And so we have a brand new mission statement, which is to protect biodiversity, foster community stewardship, and advocate for appropriate human access on Randall Preserve and the Santa Ana River Coastal Corridor. Our group is going to be, by the way, we have a new name too, Coastal Corridor Alliance. We're not going to be the Banning Ranch Conservancy anymore. The property is not called Banning Ranch anymore. We will be called the Coastal Corridor Alliance. And our focus is going to extend beyond this one property to include all the publicly owned, contiguous, and open spaces that are right next to Randall Preserve at the mouth of the Santa Ana River. We call these areas the Coastal Corridor of the Santa Ana River. So our new name is going to be the Coastal Corridor Alliance. And I'm actually really flying through this pretty quickly. So I just wanted to share some pearls of wisdom that I have learned 25 years of being an environmental open space activist. And the first one is just simple. This is going to be obvious, I think, to most of you, but it's always nice to reflect on these. The first one was, organize. Nothing ever gets done just randomly, or you got to organize. And when I first moved to Orange County in '95, I threw myself in with the Bolsa Chica effort. And I think I met some of you at that time. And one thing I saw is that they're having their success at Bolsa Chica because they organize and they hold meetings. And I kind of took the first step that then ran Banning Ranch. I said, I'm going to hold a monthly meeting. In many ways, that's what I've done for the last 25 years. I've done a million other things, but at the heart of it is just holding a monthly meeting. Don't ever let anyone tell you that a development is a done deal. I mean, it just never is. So don't let anybody, even an environmental activist, tell you something's a done deal. And prepare for the long game. You're going to be giving your life to these efforts. They're not something you're going to wrap up in a year or two. If you look at it that way, you're going to find yourself 5 years into it. Plan for doing it the rest of your life and try to do one thing every day. I know, obviously, I do more than one thing every day. Melanie does a million things every day, but just try to do something every day. Pace yourself. You don't want to alienate your family or friends. Just make it part of your life. Don't burn bridges with anybody. Don't ever bad talk anybody. Treat people with respect. My little example of that is the mayor of Newport Beach at the time that the project was approved back in 2012. She led the effort, 7-0 vote of the council. And, we were not happy about that, obviously, but it turns out now she supports us. And we never did say anything bad about her or anything. And I'm really glad we didn't. I think there's a really good relationship now. She's come around to supporting the project, and we couldn't be happier. Only as good as your reputation. You really got to be careful as an activist group. You can't start making claims that are not true. Everything you say, you have to back it up with data, and especially in the case of wildlife, you just have to know the data and be stellar in your reputation. And I say chance favors the prepared mind. There are so many things that happened over the last 25 years that we could not have planned for, could not have seen coming. But because we had such a good organization in place, we really were able to take advantage of these lucky breaks, or as I call them, blessings from above. Another way of saying this is you make your own luck. And one of my favorite sayings is actually one of the developers consultants that would always say this, but it's so true for anybody, is the world belongs to those who show up. So you got to show up at those meetings. You can't just, you got to be there. Know the science and know the law. This was extremely important for us. It was in the coastal zone. The Coastal Act is a very strong environmental law, but you have to understand how the Coastal Act works. You have to understand what ESHA is. And we knew the law and we knew the science. We knew we had really strong arguments that a lot of the property should be considered ESHA by the Coastal Commission staff. And we brought this data to the staff and really made our case. And I think that goes on to the next thing. Well, one thing we did, which I think looking back was one of our best things ever, and I really got to give a lot of credit to our previous executive director, Steve Ray. We really took the time to educate all officials and their staff. And I know Steve for years, like 5 years before the project ever even came before the Coastal Commission, he would go up and down the coast and attend every single Coastal Commission hearing. And during those 5 minutes of public comment or whatever, he would get up and say something about Banning Ranch. And we'd meet with the staff. And really by the time the project came to the Coastal Commission in 2016, the commissioners knew it forwards and backwards, and the staff knew it even better. There's going to be good days and bad days. You just got to not let them get to your head. You can't be too high when you have a good day and not be too discouraged when you have a bad day. You just got to keep going, moving forward, and know that whatever you're doing, it's making a positive impact. Don't worry about how much of a positive impact it is. You're heading in the right direction. And that's all I can say for now. Thank you very much. I flew through 25 years in such a short time, but that means we have time for discussion. So Melanie, why don't you handle the discussion if there's any?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Terry. And there are a lot of moments in this particular project where there were key successes or key failures. And I want you to speak for just a moment while I give folks an opportunity to raise their hand, and then I'll unmute you. Terry, can you talk about the Supreme Court decision and how that kind of changed the tone of what you were doing and the trajectory of the success that you ultimately found?
Yeah, well, I briefly alluded to winning a unanimous decision at the state Supreme Court. And as often the case is that when the Supreme Court makes a decision, it becomes precedent-setting law. And in this case, what the precedent that now exists because of our victory at the state Supreme Court is, well, prior to our victory, if a project was being, promoted in the coastal zone, the local jurisdiction, and in this case, Newport Beach, could kind of punt on whether or not something had ESHA and was consistent with the Coastal Act. They could say, well, this is for the Coastal Commission to decide. As far as we're concerned, it's a great project. Coastal Commission says there's ESHA, well, that's up to them. But we, the city of Newport Beach, like this project, and it meets, it's good enough for us. And now the precedent is that any project in the coastal zone, the local jurisdiction will have to make a really honest attempt. They ultimately, they can't decide what is ESHA or not, but they won't be able to punt on it anymore. They'll have to make an honest evaluation of it. And that's probably the best thing for the environmental community that came out of our state Supreme Court decision. Plus, practically speaking, it really, as I said earlier, it knocked the developers' plans back to square one. And I think it really gave them pause and made them start thinking, maybe we should sell this property. And then, like I said, enter Trust for Public Land and Frank and Joanne. And that was the fortuitous sequence of events that followed.
So just to summarize, it sounds like you credit that ESHA decision by the state Supreme Court with kind of forcing the landowners to think or rethink about whether or not they wanted to potentially sell the property for conservation rather than develop it.
I have to think that played big in their decision.
Great. All right, Marcia. And Marcia is the one who said, bring Terry in. So
yeah, well, I was talking about how before I threw myself in with Banning Ranch, I was involved with Bolsa Chica, and that's where I know Marcia from. So we go way back. Anyway, go ahead, Marcia. It's good to see you.
Sure. Good to see you, Tara. You can't know how proud I am that I did meet you way back then. I think you attended one of our Sierra Club Preserve Bolsa Chica Task Force meetings. That's where I first remember meeting you. And it's just been so heartening to see you go through every single one of those items. You just went through that list. You've done that, and it's that's a great list to share with people for sure. Now I have a question. I have two questions now because you mentioned this Supreme Court decision. I'm very interested in this. I didn't realize that they went after clarifying the ESHA issue, and I'm wondering, one, do you have a copy of that decision you might be able to share with us through Melanie or something? Because that is a big issue that in the past, the Coastal Commission has sort of let the California Department of Fish and Wildlife determine that, but they haven't always been the best actors on it. I mean, they did a great job at Bolsa Chica, but not necessarily other places. So it'd be great to get a copy of that decision and understand that better. And you know, and the second thing I have a question about is the indigenous people. You did an amazing job at bringing together indigenous tribal leaders for the Coastal Commission hearing, as I recall, the last Coastal Commission hearing. And I just wonder if you know, how you did that, because where we are in LA County, which is where I am now, it's very challenging because not all of there's about 5 or 6 different groups that lay claim to whether or not they are Tongva or something else, and they've got lots of different names and lots of different, you know, just like those of us with European ancestors, not everybody sees things this in the same way and can work together collaboratively. So I just wondered, like, what hints you might have of how you worked with the indigenous tribal leaders so well.
Well, yeah, first question is the Supreme Court decision is available on the internet. All you have to do is Google Banning Ranch Conservancy versus Newport Beach. And it's right there, and a million other legal analysts have written about it, and it's for me, it's fun to read. But as far as working with the indigenous community, I was maybe naive in the sense that I did not realize at the time, like for example in the Tongva, that there are 5 different groups, and I just kind of went into it. First of all, I want to say that I don't take credit for bringing the indigenous community to this effort. It became clear that they were aware of it and more than happy to help, whether or not I was there to ask them or not. They knew it was on their radar, at least certainly amongst the activist tribal members. What I did do is I just, like a mad fiend, just asked everybody, who's a tribal activist? Who should I call? Who should I call? And assembled this list and just kept calling these people. And I know we had a few giant conference calls, and others I just followed up. I would just get a lead, a contact, and reach out. And so I at least knew who they were, and I said I want them to know what we know. But I do want to say that the tribal community had their own reasons for wanting to protect the area. I joke about it, very simplistic way of looking at it. It's kind of a three-legged stool that the environmental community, we were out there, and I would say I was more in that community than anything else. We were out there fighting for the fairy shrimp and the burrowing owls. And then there was the quality of life community. Another name people might call them are NIMBYs, but the people just lived around that area. They didn't want a big development there. They didn't want the noise, the traffic. They wanted a park just because they lived there and they wanted a park there. And then the third community, I would say, is the tribal community. And they had their own reasons, and it was more of an ancestral connection to the land, more so than, than anything, I guess. So, but no, I just went into it like, I just give me a name, give me their contact. I'll reach out to them, and started building my contact list. And then as you were there, Marcia, on September 2016, so many showed up from that community, from the Tongva and the Ahachiman. Having said that, there was some Tongva group that did support the project, but I remember at the time talking to the Coastal Commission, like, well, the tribal community supports this project. And I kind of remember having to explain to them, no, that's just one group on the Tongva that's supporting it. And most people I talk to in the tribal community do not want this project. So yeah, it was a learning experience, and I met a lot of amazing, wonderful activists, and I was very happy for it.
All right. Does anyone, do you have yes, the heart emoji.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Go ahead and raise your hand. I did drop the link to the Supreme Court decision in the chat, but I will also include that in today's minutes so that everybody has those. Terry, I'm curious also, more recently though, Banning Ranch Conservancy has used the Native American Heritage Commission list, which is another way you can get access to the tribal leaders and entities throughout a particular geography. So that's another resource that I can include. But Terry, can you describe some of the work that the Conservancy has done in terms of outreach more recently?
Yeah, we've always considered that the tribal communities, Ahachiman and Tongva people, to be an important part of this coalition, and we certainly intend to. We want to see them remain an important part of the coalition. So I know that Melanie and I have actually, using that list she just talked to, we've been actually trying to reach out to elected tribal chairs that some of them we've never talked to before, but we want to make sure that we, build bridges and move forward. I have always said that, well, as much work as it was for the last 25 years, the next 25 years is going to be a tremendous amount of work. We need 20 Banning Ranch Conservancies, and we need 40 tribes out there. There's going to be so much work, and we need everybody to help out. And so we've been trying to reach out to all the tribal communities, and there's going to be a tribal access and engagement plan that will actually, Indigenous people will have a real role on the property.
Perfect, thanks. Does anyone else have any other questions for Terry? I mean, this is the tenacity pays off comment, or as Liz Brown from Laguna Greenbelt always says, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And Terry has has proven that being at the table is critically important. So we'll see if anyone has any other questions.
I just see so many names on here, and many of them I recognize and know. And, please use our example as inspiration. Things went right for us in ways that we didn't see coming. We're grateful for it. But I know that if you all work hard, you'll make a difference. Whether it's a little bit of a difference or a big bit of difference, you'll make a difference. And I'll just say really quickly, when I first started, I thought if we did everything right, we would get a smaller development. The idea of preserving the entire property was like a pipe dream. And I told myself, if we could get a smaller project, we get the footprint reduced by 20 acres. I go, that's 20 acres. That's 20 acres of Newport Beach real estate that we, kept from being homes, and it's going to maintain the habitat there. So and we ended up saving 400. But my point is that even a little bit of a victory is still a victory. So yeah, but you know, yeah. And I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime. Melanie will make my contact available. You know, I have hopefully maybe a story that can help you at some point. So
Marcia, you have another question, then we'll go to Sharon.
I do. I actually another two-part question. One, I noticed on the overhead map you showed that there were some wetland, lowland areas that were not in part of this, and I just wondered who owns those now, and do you have a collaborative relationship with them? And the second thing is, I was so interestingly surprised when it was reported that MRCA was going to be the owners, because while we have worked with them at the Ballona Wetlands in the very beginning of the state acquisition there, they have been loath to get involved with us because they said their territory didn't go that far south. And well, they're way far south now with you guys. So I was pleasantly surprised though, because I think they're more so the kind of organization that can work with a community group like yours, as opposed to some of the agencies in the state that have gotten far afield from their missions. So I just wondered how that happened, and you know, so the land ownership next to yours, and then how the MRCA connection came about.
right. Well, there are tidal wetlands right. You know, being at the mouth of the Santa Ana River, there are tidal wetlands that are not part of Randall Preserve, and most of those are owned by the Army Corps of Engineers. They actually used to be part of Banning Ranch, but they were purchased by the Army Corps for mitigation, and they were restored. So yes, I think that's what you're talking about. There's Army Corps wetlands right kind of that surround, or not surround, but they're just right next to adjacent to Randall Preserve. And yes, MRCA, I am grateful for their involvement. We were for a long time trying to get this property to become an Orange County park, you know, working with the county. And it may become an Orange County park one day, but at the time the wheels of bureaucracy were moving too slowly. And we had to have a takeout agency in writing. And I don't know the whole story, but I think it was really more than anything based on the really, really good relationships that the people at Trust for Public Land had with the people at MRCA. And MRCA agreed to come in and be the takeout agency for this. And we are eternally grateful. So I will just thankful for MRCA. You don't know how, I mean, as you probably know, Marcia, but everyone thinks, oh, once you buy the property, it's done. Well, you got to find someone who's going to take care of it. Someone's going to own title, and with that comes a lot of responsibility and expenses. And it's not that the public entities don't come falling over themselves to take on that responsibility. You kind of have to convince them. It's not easy.
The other thing I'll add, and you had mentioned this during your presentation, MRCA is actually a joint powers authority that's local. It's not a state agency, but it does have one state conservancy affiliated with it, which is the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. So just correcting that. And then they have two other partners in that JPA, which is both park and rec districts. So Sharon, I will unmute you, or at least ask you to unmute, and then you can ask your question.
Hi, well, first of all, I was an infinitesimal part of this, and it's so exciting to see that it came about. Very, very, very nice. I was just curious, I'm also a stakeholder with the Coastal Quest Wetlands Study, and I didn't know if Banning Ranch or Coastal Alliance now, Coastal Corridor Alliance, was doing any work with them. I know that they work with the State Coastal Conservancy, and we're looking to get funds to remediate wetlands, and they're looking at the Upper Newport Bay and the Seal Beach Naval Station. But I think that you're very much a part of that landscape, and I didn't know if you were aware of that study, part of that study.
I will say, and I'm going to turn this over to Melanie because I think she'll be much more knowledgeable about it, but there is a wonderful opportunity to restore tidal flow to a bunch of degraded and diked off coastal wetlands. I mean, as you can see, about a third of the property at Randall Preserve is degraded coastal wetlands. They've been diked off, so there's no longer any tidal flow, and that allowed them to move into their oil operation into those lowlands. The oil operation is going to be removed. The well is going to be capped, and tidal flow could be restored. The actual acreage of tidal of coastal wetlands will be increased eventually. It's going to take a long time, take a lot of money. And we would be grateful for any help of your organization. Melanie, what can you say?
Yeah, and so just for context, for those of you that don't know, I wear a lot of hats. So for Power in Nature, I work with Hills for Everyone, founders of Chino Hills State Park. But Terry and I are connected because I also serve as the executive director of the Banning Ranch Conservancy, soon to be Coastal Corridor Alliance. We're launching next week, so this was another soft launch opportunity. But Coastal Quest, absolutely, we are engaged with them, have been participating in the meetings, sharing our plans and the fact that these studies are going to be conducted. One of the studies under the Coastal Resilience Strategy is going to be a wetland feasibility study. And we got permission from the Southern California Wetlands Recovery Project to list the Randall Preserve on the Wetland Recovery Project list, which doesn't necessarily make you eligible for funding, but it puts you higher on the list, and you have access to agencies like the Coastal Commission, NOAA, Coastal Conservancy, Army Corps, for help permitting or project development. And so absolutely, we're engaged with Coastal Quest, and it's because of the wetland feasibility study and the coastal resilience strategy that engagement is so important.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions for Terry? All right, not seeing any. So Terry, thank you so much. I'll let you get back to your day job. He took 40 minutes out of his day to join us here, and that is the story of activism, right? Where most folks have a day job and participate in these things as they can squeeze it in. So we appreciate your ability to do that with us today, and we'll go ahead and transition into our regular meeting. So Terry, if you don't want to listen in, you're welcome to leave.
I'm going to get back to my work, but thank you everybody for coming and listening. Appreciate it. And again, I am more than happy to talk to you. Welcome to give me a call anytime on my personal cell phone. Melanie will make the number available. I am so happy to talk about it. And if there's anything that I've learned that can help you with your issues or endeavors, that would be great, because that's what we got to do. We got to share our knowledge and stick together. So thank you, everybody.
Great. Thanks, Terry.